My granddaughter finally learned that the man she called Dad her entire life wasn't her real father. My daughter-in-law begged me to stay quiet. I smiled and said nothing. What happened next shattered my family forever. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end. And comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The dining room smelled faintly of cinnamon candles and roasted turkey when everything began to fall apart. Outside, cold November rain tapped softly against the windows of my Connecticut home. Inside, my family laughed around the table as if we were still normal people. At 68, I had become very good at pretending. Pretending not to notice the tension whenever my son-in-law Daniel entered the room. Pretending not to see the way my daughter-in-law Vanessa avoided looking directly at me. Pretending I didn't remember the night, 27 years ago, when a frightened young woman arrived at my front door holding a newborn baby and a secret that could destroy multiple lives. "Mom, can you pass the sweet potatoes?" Vanessa asked, her voice overly cheerful. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine glass. Across the table sat Emma, my granddaughter, 26 years old, bright, kind, completely unaware that the man who raised her had spent decades living inside a lie. Then Daniel stood up slowly. "I have something to announce," he said. The room quieted instantly. And when I saw the white envelope in his hand, my stomach turned cold. Because I already knew what was inside. Daniel held the envelope with both hands. But I could see the anger trembling beneath his calm expression. Vanessa had gone completely pale beside him. Even under the warm dining room lights. Her face looked drained of color. Emma laughed nervously. "Dad, what's with all the drama?" Nobody answered her. I lowered my eyes to my coffee cup, watching the steam curl into the air. 27 years ago, Vanessa had sat in this same kitchen crying so hard she could barely breathe. She was only 21 then. Young, terrified, carrying a secret she begged me to help bury. And I did. For years, I convinced myself I was protecting the family. Daniel finally cleared his throat. "Last month, I took one of those ancestry DNA tests." Vanessa's wineglass slipped slightly in her hand. A tiny sound, barely noticeable. But I heard it. "We got the results back yesterday," Daniel continued. "Apparently, Emma and I share no biological connection." The room went silent except for the rain tapping against the windows. Emma stared at him blankly at first, almost smiling like she expected this to be some strange misunderstanding. Then she looked at her mother. "Mom?" Vanessa opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her eyes slowly moved toward me instead. That was the moment Emma noticed it too. The fear. Not confusion. Not shock. Fear. "Grandma," Emma whispered carefully. "You knew?" I closed my eyes for one long second. Because suddenly, every lie in this family had finally run out of places to hide. Vanessa stood up so quickly her chair scraped hard against the hardwood floor. "Margaret," she whispered sharply, staring at me now instead of Daniel. "Please, don't." Emma looked between us, confused and frightened. I could see her breathing getting faster. The poor girl still believed there had to be some reasonable explanation for all of this. But deep down, she already knew. Children always know when adults are lying. Daniel slowly placed the DNA results on the table. His face looked older than it had an hour earlier. Tired, hollow. "For 26 years, he said quietly, I raised her like my own daughter." "You are her father," Vanessa said suddenly, her voice breaking. "You're the only father that matters." That wasn't an answer. Emma turned toward her mother fully now. "Who is he?" Vanessa covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Nobody moved. Nobody even touched their food anymore. The turkey sat cold in the middle of the table beside untouched cranberry sauce and half-filled wineglasses. Outside, The rain kept falling steadily against the windows. I remembered another rainy night long ago. Vanessa arriving at my house with mascara running down her face, begging me not to tell Daniel the truth before the wedding. "He'll leave me," she cried back then. "Please, I was young. It only happened once. And I believed silence would protect everyone. I was wrong." "Mom," Emma said again, louder this time. "Who is my real father?" Vanessa finally looked at me with tears filling her eyes. Because she knew I was the only person left in that room who could still destroy the lie completely. I looked at Emma for a long moment before speaking. Her eyes were red already. Not from crying yet, from holding the tears back. She looked so much like her mother when she was young. Same dark hair, same nervous habit of twisting her fingers together when frightened. But she had his eyes. That was the cruel part. Blue, clear, impossible to ignore once you knew the truth. "His name was Michael Turner," I said quietly. Vanessa let out a broken sound beside me. Daniel closed his eyes. Emma just stared at me. "Michael," she whispered. "Mom's old friend Michael?" I nodded slowly. Michael Turner had been Daniel's college roommate almost 30 years ago. He used to come to our house every Sunday afternoon for football games and barbecue dinners. Charming, easygoing, the kind of man who made everyone laugh without trying too hard. And Vanessa had fallen into bed with him 2 months before her wedding. Just once. At least that was the story she told me while crying in my kitchen all those years ago. "He meant nothing," she sobbed back then. "It was a mistake. A mistake that became a child." Emma suddenly pushed her chair back from the table. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, that can't be true." Vanessa reached for her arm immediately. "Emma, please listen to me." Emma jerked away from her touch. "You lied to me my whole life?" Her voice cracked hard on the last word. Daniel still hadn't moved. He looked down at the DNA papers in front of him like they had ruined something inside him that could never be repaired again. And the worst part was, nobody in that room could honestly say he was wrong. Emma grabbed her purse and walked quickly toward the front door. "Emma, wait," Vanessa cried, stumbling after her. But Emma kept shaking her head like she couldn't bear to hear another word. I heard the front door slam so hard the china cabinet rattled slightly against the wall. Then silence. Heavy silence. Vanessa stood frozen near the doorway with tears streaming down her face. For the first time in almost 30 years, she looked exactly like the frightened girl who came begging for my help. Only older now, and finally out of excuses. Daniel slowly sat back down at the table. He looked exhausted, like the truth had physically drained something out of him. "How long?" he asked quietly. Vanessa wiped her face with trembling hands. "Since the beginning." Daniel gave a small nod. Not angry. That was the part that hurt to watch. He looked defeated. "I gave her everything," he whispered. "I stayed up nights when she had fevers. I taught her how to drive. I paid for college. You were her father," Vanessa said again weakly. But Daniel stared at the rain outside the windows. "No," he said softly. "I was the man living inside someone else's lie." Nobody spoke after that. The turkey had gone completely cold now. The candles burned low beside untouched plates. Thanksgiving dinner sat there unfinished like a photograph of a family that no longer existed. Vanessa finally turned toward me. "You could have told him," she whispered bitterly. I looked at her calmly. "And you could have told the truth." She flinched like I had slapped her. Because deep down, she knew something I had learned too late in life. A lie doesn't stop hurting people just because it gets older. Daniel left my house 20 minutes later without taking his coat from the chair by the door. He just walked out into the rain. Vanessa tried calling Emma over and over after that. I could hear her pacing the kitchen while the phone rang endlessly to voicemail. By midnight, The house felt unbearably quiet. I sat alone at the dining table staring at the dirty dishes nobody had touched. Half-melted candles leaned sideways in pools of wax. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. Vanessa finally sat across from me with swollen eyes and ruined makeup. "You hate me now," she whispered. I looked at her for a long moment. The strange thing was, I didn't. I was tired. That was worse. Telling one lie is easy, I said quietly. Living inside it for 26 years destroys everyone. Vanessa covered her face and began crying again. Not loud, not dramatic, just exhausted crying from someone who had spent too many years afraid of the truth. "I loved Daniel," she whispered. "I still do." I believed her. That was the tragedy of it all. People think betrayal always comes from hate or cruelty. Sometimes it comes from fear, weakness, one terrible decision people keep trying to outrun for the rest of their lives. Around 1 in the morning, my phone finally buzzed. A text from Emma. Just 3 words. Did he know? I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I thought about Michael Turner. About the funeral 12 years ago. About the way he looked at Emma across the church parking lot before getting into his car for the last time. And suddenly, my chest felt cold all over again. I didn't answer Emma's text that night. Because the truth was complicated. Michael Turner had known there was a chance Emma was his daughter. I realized that years ago at his funeral, though nobody else seemed to notice it. I still remembered the way he stood quietly near the back of the church while Daniel greeted guests near the front. Michael barely spoke to anyone that day. He just watched Emma from a distance with an expression I couldn't fully understand back then. Now I could. Regret. When the funeral ended, Emma hugged him politely before leaving with Daniel and Vanessa. Michael held onto her a second too long. "You've grown into a wonderful young woman," he told her softly. At the time, it sounded harmless. Now those words haunted me. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and found Vanessa asleep at my kitchen table. Her phone was still clutched in her hand. She had probably spent the entire night trying to reach Emma. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Thin grey light filtered through the windows. "She won't answer me," Vanessa whispered when she noticed I was awake. I made coffee without responding. The silence between us no longer felt angry, just heavy, like two people sitting beside the ruins of something neither knew how to rebuild. Then my phone rang. "Emma." I answered immediately. Her voice sounded hollow. "Grandma, I went through Mom's old storage boxes last night." I closed my eyes slowly. Because I already knew what she had found. There were letters, Emma whispered, letters from Michael. And suddenly, the last pieces of the lie were beginning to surface on their own. I drove to Emma's apartment an hour later. The entire ride there, my stomach felt tight. Not because I was afraid of the truth anymore. At my age, truth stops being frightening. What frightens you is realizing how many years people lose hiding from it. Emma opened the door wearing the same sweater from Thanksgiving dinner. Her eyes were swollen from crying. In her hands was a small cardboard box filled with old envelopes. "I found them in Mom's storage closet," she said quietly. I sat beside her on the couch while rainwater still dripped from my coat onto the floor. The letters were old, yellowed around the edges. Most were addressed in Michael's handwriting. Vanessa never threw them away. That told me everything. Emma handed me one carefully. "Read this." My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded the paper. "Vanessa, I know you've decided to stay with Daniel. I understand why. But if the baby is mine, someday she deserves the truth. Even if you hate me for saying that. Michael." Emma stared straight ahead while I finished reading. "There are dozens of them," she whispered. "He knew." I nodded slowly. "Yes." Her breathing became shaky again. All these years, she whispered. Dad raised me while everyone lied to him. I reached for her hand gently. But Emma suddenly pulled away. No, she said softly. Don't protect Mom anymore. That sentence hit harder than yelling ever could. Because she was right. For 26 years, I told myself silence was kindness. But sitting there beside my granddaughter, surrounded by old letters and broken trust, I finally understood something painful. Silence can become betrayal too. 3 days passed before Daniel finally agreed to see Emma. He chose a small diner outside Hartford. Quiet place, the kind with faded booths, weak coffee, and older couples eating pancakes in silence. Emma asked me to come with her, but not sit at the table. So I waited near the window with a cup of tea growing cold between my hands. Daniel looked exhausted when he walked in. His beard had grown in unevenly over the last few days, and there were deep shadows beneath his eyes now. But the moment he saw Emma, his expression softened. That almost broke me. Emma stood slowly. I'm sorry, she whispered immediately. Daniel frowned. For what? For existing inside all this. His face collapsed for a second. Then he sat down across from her very carefully, like both of them were afraid one wrong word might shatter whatever remained between them. I read the letters, Emma said quietly. Daniel nodded once. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Emma asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Do you still see me as your daughter? Daniel looked down at his coffee cup for a long time before answering. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. I was there the day you were born, he said softly. I held you before anyone else did. Emma burst into tears immediately. And honestly, so did I. Because in that small diner, after decades of lies, one truth finally remained untouched. Love can survive betrayal. But only if the people inside it stop lying long enough to save it. Vanessa came to my house the following Sunday afternoon. For the first time in years, she arrived without makeup, expensive jewelry, or carefully practiced smiles. She looked tired, smaller somehow. Age catches up to people quickly after the truth finally reaches them. I opened the door without speaking and let her inside. The house smelled faintly of coffee and lemon furniture polish. Outside, the last of the autumn leaves drifted across the front yard in the cold wind. Vanessa stood awkwardly in the living room, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. Daniel filed for separation yesterday, she said quietly. I nodded once. Not surprised. She sat down slowly on the couch where Michael used to sit during football games decades ago. Funny how life circles back to the exact places where people first started making their mistakes. I never meant for any of this to happen, she whispered. I believed that too. But intentions stop mattering after enough damage is done. Emma won't answer my calls, Vanessa continued. She says she needs space. I handed her a cup of coffee carefully. She's grieving, I said. Not just Michael, not just Daniel. She's grieving the version of her life she thought was true. Vanessa lowered her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek silently. Then she looked at me and asked the question I think she had feared for 26 years. Do you think she'll ever forgive me? I stared out the window for a long moment before answering. Maybe, I said softly, but forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. And judging by the look on Vanessa's face, she finally understood that difference now. A month later, Emma invited Daniel and me to dinner at her apartment. Vanessa wasn't there. Nobody mentioned her at first. The evening felt quiet in a fragile kind of way, like all of us were learning how to speak honestly for the first time in years. Emma cooked pasta badly. The garlic bread was slightly burned around the edges. Daniel teased her gently about it. And for the first time since Thanksgiving, I heard her laugh again. Real laughter. Not forced. Not hollow. Just human. After dinner, Emma disappeared into her bedroom for a moment and returned carrying an old photograph. Michael Turner stood beside Vanessa in the picture, both of them young and smiling on some beach vacation long before Emma was born. I spent my whole life not knowing who I was, Emma said quietly. Daniel looked down at the photo but said nothing. Emma sat beside him carefully. But you're still my dad. Daniel's eyes filled immediately. He nodded once because he couldn't seem to speak. And watching them together, I realized something important. Blood creates people, but love raises them. Later that night, while washing dishes beside me, Emma suddenly asked, "Grandma, why did you finally tell the truth now?" I dried my hands slowly before answering. "Because secrets don't disappear," I said quietly. "They just wait." Emma leaned her head gently against my shoulder. And for the first time in many years, the silence inside our family no longer felt heavy. It felt honest. 6 months after Thanksgiving, Emma and I visited Michael Turner's grave together. The cemetery sat on a quiet hill outside town where the maple trees had already begun turning red and gold again. Cold autumn wind moved softly through the grass as we walked side by side carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. Neither of us spoke much during the drive there. Some truths leave people quiet for a long time. Emma knelt carefully beside the grave marker and brushed a few fallen leaves away with trembling fingers. For a moment, she simply stared at his name carved into the stone. Michael Turner. Her father. A man she had known her entire life without ever truly knowing him at all. "I wonder if he would have been a good dad," she whispered. I looked out across the cemetery before answering. "I think part of him always wanted to be." Emma nodded slowly. Then she surprised me by smiling a little through her tears. But Daniel was the one who stayed. That was the truth that mattered most in the end. Not blood. Not DNA. The people who stay. Later that evening, Emma came back to my house for dinner. Nothing fancy. Just soup, warm bread, and soft music playing quietly from the kitchen radio. Before leaving, she hugged me tightly at the front door. "Thank you for finally telling me the truth, Grandma," she whispered. I held her for a long moment. At 70 years old, I've learned families are not destroyed by truth. They're destroyed by the silence people build around it. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is finally let the truth breathe.